So good evening and welcome to Constellation Stories. My name's Helen Avery, and before we waste any time, I'm going to advise you, if you're on the Space Situation Room page, to click on Chile. Click on the Chile tab because we don't want to miss it. We've got just 5 minutes to capture Thor's helmet. So we're looking today at and this evening at Canis Minor and Canis Major, our little dog, big dog. And this is an emission nebula in Canis Major. That's so I've just got, we've just got 5 minutes. So I'm just going to check that this is indeed our mission. Here we go. Hang on. It should be coming in now, hopefully. So a bit of an abrupt start. But I absolutely don't want anyone to miss this nebula. I'm hoping it's going to come in here. Oh dear. I don't know what's going to happen. We could be starting on a doozy. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But hopefully we are looking at Chile tonight. This is the Chile wide field. And we have a Chile all sky running. So Chile's running tonight, which is fantastic. And I'm just noticing that the Canary Ultra Wide Field is set up. And I know that the Canary Islands were closed because of snow. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to see if we can... it might be a bit late to just alter whether we've got... I don't know if this is going to work. Bear with me. Chile all sky, Chile ultra wide field, Chile wide field. I'm just bearing on. I just want to make sure we've got all possible telescopes open. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see if that works. Sorry about this, but but we just want to... Chile showing up and Thor helmets in there, says Paul. Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. Great. So yeah, this is an emission nebula. As I mentioned, this is in Canis Major. And because the Canaries are closed to snow and ice, we're relying on Chile. And as I say, we can see this for like 5 minutes now. So it's hopefully it's coming through. This is... this nebula is about 15,000 light years away, and it's a whopping 30 light years in size. And to look at, it's like super, super spacey. So I'm just see if I can check with you what's going on here. So it looks like Thor's helmet, if you are familiar with the Norse god Thor. We should be seeing this come through. I think that's sort of it down in the sort of middle right region. And it is, I say, it looks like Thor's helmet. I don't know where Thor is. It's a sort of question to ponder. Where did he go? But it's more like a interstellar bubble, and it's like blown as like a fast wind from the bright massive star in its center. It kind of sweeps through this surrounding molecular cloud, and this star is a Wolf-Rayet star. In particular, it's called WR7, and it's a really, really hot giant, and thought to be kind of in its pre-supernova stage of evolution, kind of nearing its end. And that star is like an insane 280,000 times brighter than the sun and 16 times more massive, and it shows off this really lovely blue-green like color. Due to oxygen atoms in the glowing gas. So taking a look at that, and then we'll get back to where we normally are. Okay, so now we're rolling on. So the lineup for this evening, as I said, we're relying on Chile, but we have a clear night, and we're going to be looking at Canis Minor for the next half an hour, and then we're going to switch into Canis Major. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see too much in Canis Major, which is why I was really hoping to catch Thor's helmet. It was kind of just a taster. And in fact, I'm going to share an image with you on the page that Lewis took of Thor's helmet. So you can really see in all its glory and that wonderful nebulosity there. I'm just going to leave that up for a moment. But if you are back on the chilly wide field, we're looking at Procyon or Procyon or Procyon, however we want to say it, it doesn't matter. And that's what we're looking at right now. So this is like the main star of Canis Minor. And then after this, we have the second star of Canis Minors. There are more than 2 stars in Canis Minor, but these are the 2 that we typically see and find Canis Minor from. So we're going to say, we're taking a look at this, sharing some stories about dogs. I don't know if you know this, but Chinese New Year is on Friday. And it is going to be the year of the Earth Dog, or the Chinese New Year of the Dog, to be less specific. So I thought very apt that all things tonight will be dog related. That's what we're going to talk about. So to start with, like, where can we find our trusty dogs in the sky? And I found this lovely little map that I'll put on the main page. That kind of helps us out. So if you remember last week, we looked at Monoceros, the unicorn, and there was that very lovely picture of a little dog on the unicorn's back. So you can see from this that Canis Minor is sort of above Monoceros on the back of the unicorn. And then Canis Major is below the unicorn. And one way of finding them is Sirius is kind of in a line with Orion's belt. And if you remember from when we talked about Orion, we talked about the 3 wise men. Well, this was the star in the east that they were pointing to. It was Sirius. So how wonderful is that? So you can sort of find Sirius, and then you sort of head up and find Procyon, leap over the unicorn, and there it is. Or you can find Procyon by coming over from Betelgeuse or down from the twins. And they are part of the winter circle. So I've been talking about this on the discussion board and kind of just put out a challenge to new members who are looking for something to get started of aiming, sort of setting missions to get the winter circle. And the winter circle is a collection of 6, 7, sometimes 8 stars that are really easily findable, if that's the word, with the naked eye in the winter sky in the northeast. And we've kind of worked our way around the whole circle actually through our constellations so far, and these are our last 2, Procyon and Sirius. So if you're doing part of the Winter Circle Challenge, then I recommend you take a quick shot right now so you can get Procyon, and stay tuned so you can get Sirius. And actually, if we have time at the end of tonight, I thought it might be kind of fun to have a little bit of a quiz on these winter circle stars, where I'll show some images and we'll try and guess which stars they are, or you'll try and guess them. I know them. I have the list. So if we have time, keep a pen and paper handy for that at the end. But back to Procyon. I'm not worried, are you? We're looking at it here. Beautiful. It's a binary star system, and it consists of a white main sequence star, that's Procyon A, and then a faint white dwarf companion, Procyon B, and they orbit each other every 40 odd years. Now Procyon, I know some people haven't heard of it. Sort of put some things out on Twitter today, and people are like, I've just never heard of it. I don't think I had actually until maybe a year ago. And it's the 8th brightest star in the sky. And it's pretty near. It's only 11 light years away. So one of our nearest stellar neighbours, although not as near as Sirius. And we're just moving on now to the beta star. Procyon means in Greek, it meant before the dog, and it heralded the coming of the dog star, which is Sirius. So sometimes it's known as little dog, and then Sirius is known as big dog. And it's interesting with these 2 constellations, Canis Major, Canis Minor, it's really more about those 2 stars and kind of the pattern that makes up the constellation. You know, was kind of like shoehorned in there, I guess, sort of later in time by the Greeks. But certainly earlier, the focus was just Procyon and Sirius rather. And we'll talk a little bit later about why Sirius was so important and why Procyon therefore was important, because Procyon heralded the arrival of Sirius and Sirius heralded the arrival of something else. But this, I mean, I love this star, Procyon, and we'll talk a bit more about this one we're looking at in a minute. But so Procyon has been sort of compared to John the Baptist by early Christians, that it was, kind of the heralder of what was later to come, which would have been Jesus, which would have been Sirius. And Procyon was kind of known as also like a bleary-eyed Sirius. It's a little more dull, it rose earlier, and sometimes it was called like the Syrian Sirius, because apparently it sets in the direction of Syria, although I have no idea if that is true. So this star that we are looking at right now, let me just pull this out, it sort of has a bit of a confusing story as well, because it's called gomeisa or gomeisa, the star here, the beta star of Procyon, and that too kind of means bleary-eyed woman, and in fact it's a bit obscure whether this just took the name from Procyon, was it just kind of added on to sort of build up a constellation for the Greeks. We're not really sure, and this one's further away. It's 162 light years away, and it's about 3.5 times the sun's mass, and it's supposed to have a blue hue. I don't know if that's coming through here for you now, but we're here for some stories, so I wanted to share some stories with you. One was this. So, is Canis Minor a dog? That's kind of the big question. We know that Canis Major is a dog. Canis Major, we typically think of being attached to Orion. It was Orion's hunting dog. And then we kind of said, well, both of them are Orion's hunting dogs. But really, that came a little bit later, say, like, with the ancient Greeks and then later still it was kind of bed in, but it wasn't really that intentionally. I mean, the early stories of Orion you'll see, and the myths of Orion, there's just one dog. And if you remember, we had that lovely image during Orion of Orion blinded walking up the mountain to see this, to try and have his sight repaired by the sun, and he had one hunting dog with him, and then that dwarf, if you remember, on his shoulder. So what is Canis Minor? And it could well be a fox. So one of the Greek myths is that there was this hunter, Cephalus, married to a beautiful woman, Procris, and husband and wife, very happy, until one day, as in most Greek tragedies, there is a one day, Eos, the goddess of the dawn, decides she likes Cephalus. And so, getting what she wants, because she's a goddess, she starts an affair with him. But she soon tires of hearing Cephalus talk incessantly of his beloved Procris. So, a goddess scorned, she sends Cephalus away, but she first plants this seed in his mind that Procris is cheating on him. She thinks she'll get him back if he leaves, ends up falling out of love with Procris. So, as it turns out, Procris gets pretty annoyed by her suspicious husband following her around everywhere, and so she does go and cheat on him. But then she sort of decides that she would like him back, and she gives him 2 gifts to woo him back. So she gives him Laelaps, a hunting dog who always catches his prey, and she gives him a spear that always hits its target. So Cephalus is pretty happy with this, especially because there is a fox running around a forest that is said to be uncatchable. It has a destiny, this fox, never ever to be caught. But Cephalus thinks that Laple, his hunting dog, could now be the match. So he sends Laple out to hunt the fox. But a hunting dog that always catches its prey and a fox that can never be caught kind of means that the chase is going to go on for eternity. So Zeus, taking pity on these 2 animals, turns them to stone so they don't have to run anymore. And then he puts them in the sky as Canis Major as Lapley and Canis Minor as the fox. But our story doesn't quite end there, because we still have this spear. So things head south for Procris and Cephalus again. And this time it is Procris who suspects her partner of cheating. So one day she follows him into the forest to spy on him. And Cephalus, on his hunt, hears something rustling in a bush, and thinking it's a boar, hurls his super accurate spear into the shrubs. But of course, this spear never misses, and as we know, it is Procris hiding in the bushes. And as most Greek tragedies end in despair, she dies on the spot, and he, devastated by losing his love, hurls himself off a cliff. So another cheery story from the Greeks. But that is why potentially Canis Minor is not a dog after all, but it is a fox. So what are we looking at now? I'm hoping, and we'll see, we'll look really close. And it's difficult to say, we haven't got canaries, and so I'm normally would use one of those for this particular object. We're actually looking for a barred spiral galaxy. So you might want to just scan around, see if you can see anything in there. I'm just going to check my schedule. I always put the schedule up on on the discussion board, so we can follow along. What am I seeing here? Yep, so I've got this. It's NGC 2485. So I'm not sure we're going to have the fortune of seeing it. Maybe your eyes are better than mine. Mine are pretty bad, I have to say. But keep looking if you can to spot that galaxy in amid our fox. It's now turned to stone in the sky. But there are some other stories about Canis Minor that I thought were pretty interesting. One is that for the Wardman people of the Northern Territories in Australia, Procyon and Gomeisa, those two stars, they were actually called Magum and Gurumana, and they describe them as these humans who were transformed into gum trees in the dream time. Although their skin has turned to bark and they were unable to speak with a human voice, so they could communicate by rustling their leaves, which I really loved because I saw this connection with old Procris in the bushes rustling the leaves too. So very interesting. I thought that they both sort of had that connection. So I'm keep peering. Is that it in the middle? Is that a spiral galaxy? Searching, having a look. Okay. A couple of other things. Sirius and Procyon are actually part of an entirely different constellation for the South Pacific Islanders. They made up this constellation with Canopus that was called the Bird. So birds of paradise are extremely important, and birds in general are very important to South Pacific Islanders, and obviously they didn't have wolves and things like that. So it was birds that tended to sort of become their symbols, and fish, as we've talked about before. Even some of their tribes were named after birds. But this combination of Canopus to Sirius to Procyon was seen as, say, of this bird, with Sirius sort of being the body of the bird and Procyon and Canopus being the edges of their wings. And that the wing of Sirius to Procyon was slightly shorter than Sirius to Canopus was said. It was sort of explained by them saying that the wing was broken of the shorter wing from Sirius to Procyon. It was the broken wing. And then, interestingly, there's another connection with these three stars, Sirius, Procyon, and Canopus. And this is the story in Arabic legend that Sirius and Procyon are the two sisters of the brother Canopus. And Canopus marries Rigel, but then Canopus murders Rigel for reasons that we're not privy to. Who knows? And then flees south to avoid the wrath of his sisters. And so Sirius follows him across the Milky Way, but Procyon stays behind and cries her eyes out. And that's sort of also a connection to the bleary-eyed one that we talked about earlier, that Procyon is often called. So now we're moving on to what may or may not be able to see, a lenticular galaxy. And if we're not seeing them tonight, never mind, we can always set them up and see them maybe with the Canary one, perhaps. So here we go. Let me just find my schedule. So we're going to be looking at this screen for 10 minutes. So we're going to have a really good look. And this is NGC 2508, the lenticular galaxy in Canis Minor. One of the things about Canis Minor is there's not a whole lot to see in it. And actually these galaxies are really, really, really far away. But I didn't want to just hang out on Procyon. And who knows what you're going to see when who knows what could become zooming by. So it's always worth pointing it to something. And Sirius, actually, we can't see till 9:30. So we are in this bit of a pause here while we move along to Canis Major at 9:30. But what I thought was that we'll come back to Canis Major later in the year, but I didn't want us to miss it this winter. And because we're doing this at 9 to 10, this set time, it just means that it was very hard to see in both Canary Islands and Chile. So even in Canis Major, we're not going to get to see too much of the wonderful objects this evening, but we'll see some. But anyway, I thought maybe I'll just share another story while we're sat here peering into the depths of space. It's something for us to ponder about. And this is about, it's kind of just a fun story. It's not really hugely relevant here, but I wanted to throw it in about the pronunciation of some of these objects. One of the wonderful things about Slooh is that, we don't mind how things are pronounced. Maybe, even like just researching for tonight, I can't tell you how many sources I looked at who said some stars are 11 light years and some are 12 and some are 15,000 and some were 12,000. I mean, that's quite a large margin of error. And, even when you think Pluto, I grew up and Pluto was a planet, and then they changed their minds. So while, of course, we're always trying to get to the facts, I think we can all be a little bit fluid on being so exact, and especially around the names. So I have this story, and I thought this was just kind of fun. So there's this guy who hears of an enlightened master living out on an island in a lake in Canada. And he's heard that this enlightened master has a mantra, a really powerful mantra, and that's the reason of his enlightenment. So he sets off to Canada, and we'll make him Orion-esque, I guess. If you remember, Orion was a bit of a dimwit and kind of arrogant, but whenever he sets off to Canada, and to make him a bit Orion-esque and to shoehorn it in tonight, we're going to give him a couple of dogs. So he and 2 dogs set off to Canada on this journey, and they find the lake, and they hire a little rowboat, and he gets in with his 2 little dogs and boats out to this island in the middle of the big lake. And when he gets there, he goes searching for this enlightened master with his 2 dogs loyally beside him. And eventually he finds this gentleman sat in some brush, kind of cooking a little meal for himself. So his dogs sit beside him. The guy takes out his notebook and pen and says to this gentleman, "Excuse me, I've heard you are an enlightened master, and I have come to learn from you how to become awakened." And this master looks at him and kind of laughs a little bit and says, "A master? Well, I wouldn't call myself that, but I am happy." and certainly I will gladly share with you what I have learned. And the guy gets his pen ready, and the dogs look up. What's going on? Gets his pen ready, and this master says, I just simply chant the mantra every day, all day, Om Namah Shiva. And this guy looks completely puzzled and says to this master, Om Namah Shiva. It's Om Namah Shivaya. And feeling like he's completely wasted his time, he picks up his bag, whistles for his dogs, walks back to the rowboat, gets in it with his dogs, starts rowing back across the lake. So there he is, grumbling to himself, pulling the oars, his dog is like whining, when he hears this voice say, hello. And he stops rowing and looks up and sees the guy from the island, the so-called master, walking on the water next to him while he's rowing. And this enlightened master hands the guy in the boat his notebook and says, you left this and your pen on the island. But do you mind if I just, before I give it back to you, just rip out a page and write down exactly what you said that correct mantra was? So I think we all know the point of this story. But yeah, it doesn't matter how we say stuff. How you want to say, you say it however you want. Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shivaya, Procyon. It's all good. So we're still looking. Is that it? Is that it in the middle? Is that it off into the distance? I can't find the piece of paper that I wrote down about how far this is away, but it may be somewhere between X million light years and more and others. Great. So our two beloved dogs in the sky, our dogs of heaven. Honestly, can't tell you how excited I was. I knew that the Chinese New Year was somewhere around here and it was going to be the dog, but I had no idea it was going to be this very week. Okay. So I'm just grabbing my notes, bear with me. So as I say, we kind of as a constellation, we think Canis Major, where we're going to move on to next, really wasn't until the Greeks and kind of like rounded out, as I say, the dog star Sirius into a whole set of stars supposedly resembling a dog, and Sirius, it said, was like held in its jaws, and sometimes it's seemed to sort of be depicted as in the heart. So I'm just going to switch over to OBS, right? Sorry, the main screen right now, and just pull up Sirius. In fact, what I'm going to do is go back to our where is. That might be best. So we can just see it. So we can see here in this particular picture, Sirius is like the in the center of the chest, the heart of the dog, which is lovely. In other pictures, it's actually rested in the jaw, which I think is also lovely too. Okay. So if you're looking on watching just on YouTube, come over to the websites, because we're going to be turning the telescopes to Sirius in a minute. But I've just put up a picture of Sirius on the screen that was taken with our cameras. I think I took this. I'm pretty sure I took this in the week, or maybe the week before, as part of our circle. I normally write down if they're from a member, so I think this might be mine. Okay. So, any joy? Yes, I think I can see that galaxy. I think I can see it. I think that's it. There's these two lines that I wish Paul Cox was here so he could tell us what that is. And I think that might be it. I don't know. That's what I'm going to say anyway. So before we get to Sirius, as it comes on, Sirius is the brightest star in our night sky, and it's going to be the brightest star for the next 210,000 years, which kind of blows me away. And obviously it was the brightest star in the sky for the ancients as well, so it was incredibly important. And so much has been written about Sirius. and its connection to humanity. We could have multiple shows just talking about Sirius. So I said I am going to try and come back to it a little bit later in the year, and also look more at some of the other objects in Canis Major. And some members kindly shared some of those objects, pictures they'd taken with me this week. So we'll have a little look at them as well later. So hopefully Sirius is going to come into view. Beautiful. And Sirius, as you're probably going to see, is a binary system, just like Procyon. And that system is about between sort of 200 and 300 million years old. It's about 8.9 light years away, so much closer than Procyon. And the name Sirius comes from the Greek word searing or scorching. So as we're looking at it here, we can really see like the brightness of that. It's unbelievable. Really amazing. And I kind of thought it was interesting that I was seeing if there was a connection between Sirius and Sirius. And Sirius is thought to come from the Latin word that meant, which is kind of what we mean today, expressing earnest purpose or thought. And I kind of love this idea of Sirius's character having this sort of very earnest purpose or thought to shine brightly, and it's kind of reflected or manifest as being so incredibly bright. And I was reading, I have this really lovely book. I'm just going to preface this by saying I have no religious leanings in any direction, but I really do enjoy reading scripture. I'm a minister, as some of you know, and my ministry, we studied Buddhism and Hinduism and the mystical texts of some of these religions, the mystic texts of Christianity and the Bible. Sufism is another one. But there's something I find very soothing and enriching, similar to how I feel about looking at the stars, that when I read some of these scriptures, I just feel, I just feel like a deep peace, similar to when I look up at the sky. So I got this book called Astronomy and the Bible, and it was published in 1919, so almost 100 years old. And it says, The Empire of Creation Seen in the Dual Light of Science and the Word by Lucas Reed. It's such a lovely book. But it mentions in it, it says about the Bible, that there is this line in the Bible that says, one star differeth from another star in glory. Look at that colour coming in. No two stars are alike. That was sort of the meaning in the Bible. And the great difference in the stars, the word announces, lies in the difference in their glory. Study their glory, for therein lies their difference. So the gentleman writing it is obviously an astronomer. And he says the word glory here, it means character and radiance. And glory meaning character, it also carries this idea of luster, brilliancy and light. So the relation of character and brightness as embodied in the word glory seems to be that of cause and effect. The brightness is the outshining or manifestation of the character. What he says that means for astronomers, that is, if we study the light given off by a star, we will know the difference in character between one star in its glory and another. So I really loved this because it's very true. Stars differ, and we get to how we have over the years become to know them, know what kind of stars they are from the light that they emanate. So there is this sort of character in there. Maybe this one, as I say, for Sirius, I always kind of think there's this real earnestness, and maybe sort of this deep thoughtfulness. So a couple of things about Sirius while we're looking at. We're going to be looking at a lot. We've got this, and then we've got a cluster, and then we're back to Sirius. So don't worry if you're not feel like you're getting enough attention on Sirius right now, if I'm distracting you. So due to precession, I was reading today that Sirius is going to move further south in the future, and in around the year 9000, Sirius won't even be visible from North and Central Europe, which I thought, wow, what a shame. how strange that it would be this like missing star. So Sirius A, as I mentioned, it's binary. It's about twice as massive as the Sun and about 25 times more luminous. But it actually has a lower luminosity than other stars like Canopus and Rigel. But its second star, and I'm thinking that's what we're seeing here, this like blob, and to the left, is Sirius B, and it's a blue dwarf, and it's sometimes nicknamed the Pup. And it's this second star that has caused a lot of excitement, because it was discovered in 1862 that there was this binary partner. Reported in the 20th century that the Dogon people of Africa knew about the existence of Sirius B, although they absolutely would have had no way of knowing about it, since they didn't have any distant viewing technology. And it's led this sort of, it's become a bit of an urban legend now that it's led to a lot of I don't know how to describe it, but conjecture that maybe people, the world was populated by people from Sirius B. I'm not kidding you. Like, tons has been written about this, because how else would they know about it? And I was reading some stories about whether it was astral projection, and they went there and like kind of came out of their bodies and went and saw Sirius B, and that's how they knew, although more likely they probably heard it from some European astronomer who visited Mali, in the late 1800s or something. But the mystery goes on, and it's really spurred some controversy, and some would say really look to this star as like a long lost home. And I have this wonderful book, and you've probably heard of it, The Sirius Mystery. It's by a gentleman called Robert K.G. Temple. And the claim is, was Earth visited by intelligent beings from a planet in the system of the star of Sirius? And it is a tome, I tell you. He has done so much research. But I'll leave it to you whether you believe that some intelligent beings came from Sirius B and taught the Egyptians how to create technology. But so much has been written about this star. And I mean, of course, it's the brightest star in the sky. It's meant so much to so many for so many years. But this sort of association with Sirius as this celestial dog has been consistent throughout the classical world. Like, even in remote China, the star was identified as a heavenly wolf. In ancient Chaldea, it was the dog star that leads, or it was called the star of the dog. In Assyria, it was the dog of the sun. In older Arcadia, it was the dog star of the sun. And even for the Osage peoples of the Great Plains, this constellation is the wolf that hangs on the side of the heavens. And the Skidi Pawnee call this the wolf star. And it kind of makes sense, particularly for those like in the cradle of civilization, in that sort of area of ancient Egypt and Babylon and Greece, because before Sirius rose just before dawn, it would rise just before dawn, just before the hottest parts of the year. So it kind of warned of this difficult time coming. So to the Greeks, this was a really, really scorching time of year. And it was even believed that Sirius had a heating effect on the Earth. So when it rose, people would say that combined with the sun, it's this Doppel effect. That's why it's so bloody hot in the summer. So the ancient Greek writer Hesiod writes of heads and limbs drained by Sirius. And Virgil said that the torrid dog star cracks the fields. And it kind of gave life to this phrase, the dog days of summer. I always wondered, I thought it's because we look at dogs and they always kind of seem flat out at the hottest time of the year, laid on their backs, and so I thought it was called the dog days, but no, it is because of this star. So for the ancient Egyptians, Sirius heralded an entirely different time, and well before the Greeks, because it appeared just before dawn, just before the Nile would flood. And so it was in fact called the Nile star, or the star of Isis, which we'll talk about a little in a minute, and it marked the new year beginning when the star flooded, when the Nile flooded. So Sirius in that sense was like a guard dog that would warn you of something approaching. And what we're looking at now is a wonderful cluster. And I think we're on this for another 10 minutes. So it's an open cluster, as you can see, no globs in sight. And it was discovered by Giovanni Battista Hodiena before 1654, and it's thought that maybe even Aristotle knew that this was there. It's got about 100 stars in it and several red giants. And the diameter of the entire cluster is pretty big. It's 25 to 26 light years across, and it's thought to be 190 million years old. So just some things there to ponder on while we're staring at M41. Again, this is all on the discussion board in the latest post about Canis Major. But back to the Egyptians. So when the ancient Egyptians saw Sirius rising just before the sun, they knew that the Nile days were nearby. And it was kind of a warning, say, to people who lived along the Nile River. So while they knew it was that was going to flood their lands, so some people had to sort of move, it was also going to add to the fertility of their lands, and that's maybe its connection with Isis, this fertility. So people would open the gates of canals that irrigated their fields and just let the Nile flood it. So Sirius arriving was serious business. and priests, who were the calendar keepers, would cite the first rising of the dog star from their temples. And apparently, and I just love this, and I cannot back this up, I cannot find something to back this up, but the temple of Isis Hathor at Dendera is apparently a statue of Isis which is located at the end of an aisle lined by tall columns. A jewel was placed in the goddess's forehead, and the statue was oriented to the rising of Sirius, so that the light from the returning dog star would fall upon the gem. And when the priest saw the light of that star shining on the gem for the first time, they would march from the temple and announce, "It is the new year. Happy New Year." And in the temple, apparently, there's the inscription, "Her Majesty Isis shines into the temple on New Year's Day, and she mingles her light with that of her father Ra on the horizon," Ra being the sun. So it's very Indiana Jones. When this light falls on this jewel in Isis's head, okay, so a secret stone door doesn't open, but the high priestesses go running into the streets and declare a New Year's Day. But I thought it was really fun. So there's this strong connection between Isis and Sirius. And also, we talked before about Isis Osiris. And also, there's a connection between the dog-faced god Anubis. So I wanted to just pop a couple of pictures up on the page, the main page. So this is Anubis. Just to jog your memory, you've probably seen pictures of this black-faced dog god. And there he is, Anubis. Okay. So the myths in Egypt, if you don't know, they get really confused because different pharaohs came along, changed myths that worked for them, But one is that the Nile was considered to have caused by the tears of Isis as she was mourning her slain husband Osiris. If you remember, her husband's brother, Osiris's brother, kills him, hacks him into little bits, and then she has to kind of wrap him together and mummify him, and I think she turns into a bird and breathes a little bit of life into him, and from that he impregnates her with Horus. And we talked about that myth before. It's a big myth for the ancient Egyptians. But what I find fascinating is, so Sirius disappeared in the daylight hours approximately for 70 days, sort of 70 days earlier, Sirius can no longer be seen in the sky. And then there's this sort of 70-day period where then it rises just before dawn. It's like the resurrection almost. And that was when they knew that the Nile was going to flood. So you can imagine how mystical it would have seemed. It sort of disappears to the underworld and then is reborn 70 days later, just as the Nile floods its banks, as sort of this sort of feeling of like coming back to create and this fertileness arriving. And the sort of connection sometimes with Sirius and Osiris is that, Osiris was the god of death and rebirth. So sometimes, people will say Sirius represents Osiris, sometimes they'll say it's Isis. What's also very interesting is that the standard period of preparation and mourning, or the standard period for preparation and mourning for ancient Egyptians, was 70 days. So kind of interesting. And I read that no one could be buried for 70 days. You had to kind of hold on to it so people could mourn and then they'd be buried. And who was the god of mummification? The one who embalmed the bodies and walked them into the afterlife? It was Anubis, the dog-headed god. So sometimes Sirius is thought to be Anubis as well, the dog star, the dog-headed god who accompanies people into the afterlife. And you can see in these images, the one on the left is Anubis holding the hands of someone who is going to the scales. So Anubis was, one of his roles was guardian of the scales. So as he sort of guided people across the threshold of the world of the living into the afterlife, one thing he would do he would weigh their hearts. And in the Book of the Dead, it shows Anubis performing this measurement that determines whether the person is worthy of entering the realm of the dead. By weighing the heart, it says, against truth, that was often represented as an ostrich feather. Anubis would dictate the fate of souls. Souls heavier than a feather would be devoured, and souls lighter than a feather would ascend. So such a beautiful role of this god. And, is it Sirius? I mean, we don't really know. I mean, Anubis was around before Osiris, and that kind of story got more. So Anubis was like the original god of death and life and rebirth, and then Osiris kind of took that role. And then some of the myths say that Anubis is actually Osiris's son, and some will say that Isis was the first to mummify anyone when she mummified Osiris. And some will say actually Anubis helped her. But the three of them are sort of intricately sort of tied up together, and there's no doubt that this star has something to do with death and rebirth, for sure. And one of the sort of morbid things I read, there was that, a couple of years ago they discovered some burial sites south of Cairo in some catacombs that were filled of like 8 million mummified animals, most of which were dogs. And the catacombs were at a place dedicated to Anubis. So it seems like maybe people were perhaps sacrificing dogs and then mummifying them and putting them in the tombs, or no, in this case they're not even in the, well, maybe they are in the tombs, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like they were with people, so I don't know why they were kind of put in this huge grave. But it's kind of, the dog was really, really important to the Egyptians, no doubt about it. I mean, it was entrusted with taking you from, through the underworld, measuring your soul. And later on, he became seen as the one who tended to the graves and the tombs. That was much later, in sort of the early hundreds BCE. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, this idea of the dogs guarding the dead and protecting the grave is all over different cultures. I mean, if you do a quick Google, you'll find so many stories of dogs whose masters have died and they stand by the graves. So, I mean, in Boetes, that constellation, for example, this is exactly what happens in that story. These dogs just stand by Boetes' body, his dead body, and I think they eventually die. But there are stories all over. So I wonder, if the Egyptians saw this. They saw this loyalty of the dog once people died. Or what was that about? It's sort of really interesting to think about. One of the best known stories of this is Greyfriars Bobby. I don't know if you know this story. It's a Scottish story. Let me put a little picture of Greyfriars Bobby up. There we go. So, and we're back on Sirius now. Lovely. So, Greyfriars Bobby belonged to John Gray, who worked for the Edinburgh City Police as a night watchman. And when John Gray died, he was buried in Greyfriars Kirkyard. It's a graveyard in the old town of Edinburgh. And Bobby became known locally because he just spent the rest of his life sitting on his master's grave. So eventually, someone paid for his license and gave him a collar. And sort of people came and fed him. He's said to have sat by that grave for 14 years. So, pretty old dog, and he hadn't known his master that long, if you think about it. But he died in 1872, Bobby, and was buried just inside the gate, not far from John Gray's grave. And then there's now a statue of Bobby, and there he is, and you can see Bobby's Bar behind him. It's called Greyfriars Bobby's Bar, and that's in Edinburgh. But that's like the most, that's the sort of typical story I think of when I think of dogs. Being this loyal friend that stays with us even through death. I mean, it's not hard to see, is it? No, maybe Bobby was just waiting for his master's soul to move along, be reincarnated. It's so fascinating that we have this deep connection with dogs as humans. I have a dog, so I feel it. I know some people aren't dog people, but I definitely feel like there's some really, I don't know, I don't want to add more to it than what is, but it feels like a very deep spiritual connection between man and dog for sure. So I'm kind of, I'm going to sort of wrap up a bit and say, so I'm sorry we didn't get to see too many like deep sky objects tonight. It was just kind of the way it works sometimes with this wonderful slot. I'm so grateful that we get to have this regular slot every week, so we could always be here together. It's great. But sometimes not all the stars we want to see might be around. However, next week we're going to look at Leo, and that will be visible in both if Canary's up and running. That would be wonderful. And interesting, that's the line in the sky, but it's Anubis is also sometimes called the jackal-headed god, the golden jackal-headed god, or even a golden wolf, which I think is interesting given like most of the pictures he has a black head, but there is this association with being a golden wolf. But I think more our golden furry animal is going to come with Leo next week. So we've got a few minutes left, and I thought what might be fun, as I said, is to have a look at some of the stars of the winter circle and see if you can guess what they are. So I'm just going to put up the map of the winter circle so you can see what I'm talking about. In fact, before we do that, let's have a look just briefly at some of the objects that our members have taken within Canis Major. So you can see, I've put these up on the board, the discussion board as suggested missions. So this one is fantastic. This is a double star. Look at this. It's like gold and blue, and that's 145 CMA, Canis Major. It's a star in Canis Major. So really lovely if you want to take a look. This one's thanks to Mario. This is the Tau Canis Major cluster. I took this one earlier this week. That's also up on the mission board. There's this lovely one from Lewis for Valentine's Day, he said. These are the kissing galaxies. You can see these lovely two galaxies in the middle, kissing lips. And he's very romantic, Lewis. He says he and his wife Jen have a Hubble poster of this galaxy on their wall. Oh, there's something for Valentine's Day. But here we are with the winter circle. Fantastic. So this is what, as I say, it's still ongoing. It's not like nothing serious. We're just kind of having a bit of a challenge to see if we can capture each of the stars in this circle. So, and it varies. Some people call it hexagon. I call it a circle, and I include a couple more stars than other people include. So it's essentially Capella. I include Castor and Pollux, Procyon, Sirius, Rigel in Orion, Aldebaran in Taurus, and I've thrown in for good measure Betelgeuse, which isn't normally in the circle, it's in the middle, but I'm going to include it in the circle. So we're up to 8 stars. And the winter triangle, by the way, is Procyon, Sirius, Betelgeuse. You can see it carved out there. If you wanted to just do the winter triangle. But that is the winter circle. So let's see. I'm going to move this to the side so you can keep a look at it. It's really small, but there you go. So if you have your pen and paper ready, I thought it'd be kind of fun if we go through. It's a mishmash of my images of these stars, as I've called the winter circle, some member images of the stars. I'm just going to go through them and see if you can guess which ones they are. So before I do that, I'm going to make sure I've got my list. Okay. So I'll pause between each one so you have a chance to write them down. Have a guess. It's hard, you know, the different telescopes that have taken them. So, okay, here's our first one. Which one do you think that is? Choice of 8 here to go with. Go for. Obviously, if that's your photo, you'll know which one it is. And here's our second one. And I think this is a really lovely exercise as well in seeing the different glory of stars, because they're all so different. That's our second, number 2. Okay, here's number 3. It's quite hard, but it's just for fun. I'm not giving clues. Here's number 4. The lovely one. This is number 5. Number 6. This one's on Twitter and Facebook, if you want to cheat. Number 7. And finally, number 8. So I guess whatever you've got left, it will be that one. Okay. So I hope you're ready. We've got just a minute left for tonight, so I'll run through these. Okay, here's our first one. That is Capella. That is Capella in Auriga. Number 2 was Rigel. It's a lovely one. That's Mario's picture. That's Rigel in Orion. Number 3 is Pollux in Gemini. Number 4, there's his twin, Castor. Number 5 was Aldebaran from Taurus, Eye of the Bull. Then we have Sirius. Number 6 was Sirius. Number 7 was Betelgeuse. They're not really part of the circle, but I threw it in. It's the middle. It's kind of in the middle of the circle. Betelgeuse. And our very last one was where we started tonight, Procyon. So if you played, let me know. See how you did. It's pretty hard, but it's fun to see the different colours of these major stars, and really how different they are in their luminosity and all their glory. So on that note, you might want to tune in for Dr. Paige Godfrey's Intro to Astronomy on Wednesday, because she will be talking about light. She's actually going to be talking about something they accidentally discovered, the cosmic microwave background radiation known as the CMB. And it's light that permeates the entire universe and has since only 400,000 years after the Big Bang. And she's going to be talking about why it's there, what is it, why is it uniform in all directions. So really wonderful to, if you want to, really delve into light. She'll be here on Slooh on Wednesday. Astronomer Paul Cox will be before me again on Sunday with his practical astronomy. I don't know if you had a chance to listen tonight. I did, and I really find his tips helpful, and I also just love listening to him, because it feels like a late night talk show. You can just sort of listen to everything he's saying and sharing, and it's really enjoyable. So he is back say next Sunday at 7:30, and then I will be here at 9 to talk about Leo. Fingers crossed the Canary Islands will be working, and there's a lot to talk about with Leo. Again, very, very important to the ancient Egyptians, but we'll think of some more different stories from elsewhere around the globe as well, in case we tire of our Egyptians, as if. So thanks for joining me this evening, and bearing with me at the beginning. Just it's my first time flying solo tonight, so I wasn't entirely sure how it's going to go, but I really appreciate it, and leave you with these beautiful images of Chile, other members' missions for this evening. And here is Procyon as we sign off. And so I wish you a really wonderful week. Think of the dog while you're out, if you're celebrating Chinese New Year and its loyalty to us through thousands and thousands of years. And wish you very clear skies so you can get out and see the winter circle. And it's ongoing. If you want to still take part in the winter circle challenge, keep taking your pics. I'm thinking maybe we'll do some sort of cool collage as winter ends in mid-March. That might be fun. So yeah, if you've got some good pictures, definitely share them with me. You can share them with the discussions board. I'm also on email, helen@slooh.com. Always love to hear from you. Any feedback welcome, as Paul was saying earlier. And that's it from me. So good night, everyone.